Seems like we have a few more folks. I'm sure some people will roll in, but in the meantime, yeah, ready, hit record if you haven't already. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Quinn. Pronouns are she, her, and I am the Membership and Outreach Manager at Bike Pittsburgh. Today, we are talking all things membership, so really building, engaging, and sustaining your membership base as it relates to your Bike Ped committees. So with that, what we'll be covering is recruitment, so really growing your membership base, your numbers, your people, engagement, so adding perceived value, and then also really the value that you add as you work together to work towards your mission, accomplish your goals, and then last but not least is retention. So building those relationships and the loyalty among your members to ultimately sustain your organization, because as we all know, is much easier to retain members than it is to be constantly recruiting new people. So that's a key component of this. And then before we dive into that, I really would love to get to know you all and who I'm chatting with today. So we can go around, do some introductions. If you could tell us your name, pronouns, what Bike Ped committee you're with, or what neighborhood you live in if you're not currently a part of a committee, and then just a little bit about your membership base. I added some quick guiding questions here, but by no means do you have to stick with those.
So Sarah, I'll jump in and start there.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me okay? I'm trying out some new earbuds.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Jen Kurtz. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And let's see here. Oh, I live in the neighborhood of Greenfield. So we recently started Greenfield Livable Streets as our ped bike advocacy group. And Anna, thank you for joining us as often as you do. Love that. We're really just kind of getting off the ground. We had a couple of meetings before the holidays. I don't really know if any of us have met in person, prior to COVID and whatnot. My old neighbor just joined us, which is great. So he's the only person I know personally, but everyone else I still have yet to meet post-COVID. I think what we're struggling with, and I certainly don't want to speak for the group as a whole, but I think my opinion would be really just sort of, we have a lot of great ideas. I think we have a lot of people that sort of bring their voice to the table. But I don't know if we know how to exactly, sort of push off on anything, how to get things started, kind of who to go to for what. Anna's, it just instrumental in helping us sort of figure those things out. But those things we don't organically know on our own. So there's a lot of guessing. And I think, yeah, just kind of like really getting started and how we go about taking initiatives on different things. Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
Someone else wants to go next?
Hi, everyone. Tom, he, him, his, from Aetna and the Aetna Pedestrian Alliance. The thing we're struggling with is really just trying to figure out the best way to engage folks offline. We exist primarily through social media at the moment, and that was pre-COVID as well. So we're just trying to find ways to reach out to get into the community a little bit more. And the pressing membership goal is to have a regular core group of folks who can help out with things, because right now it's just me and some folks from Walk Bike Shaler who support me. So just trying to build up our numbers and some folks who can help put some of our initiatives into action. So nice to see everyone tonight.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that offline struggle is real. I hate to use the words now more than ever, but I feel like it's very applicable there. I guess Bruce or Dave, if I can put you on the spot, because you're two other faces I'm familiar with.
I'll go. So I'm Dave, he, him, live in Squirrel Hill. I'm a member. I go to the meetings when we have them occasionally, and I try to go to the online meetings. It's a fairly active group in terms of our group. There's a few people that are just real solid and on top of everything in terms of keeping notes and agendas and everything. So I feel as a neighborhood organization, we've been doing pretty well. But like I said, I'm not as involved in it as I would like to be at times. And I'm also just interested in in membership in terms of other things. Just that may be going on in my life. So that's kind of why I'm here. Not so much as a rep for the Squirrel Hill Bike Ped Committee, but just for self-knowledge.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, everything we'll be talking about today directly relates to membership, regardless of whether or not you're going to apply it to committee or other organization.
Right.
Yeah, whatever you're working on. So awesome. Suppose if Walter, Nick, or Bruce want to chime in.
Sure. I'm Walt, he, him, his. I'm with Bruce in Bloomfield. I don't know. Bruce is really taking the reins on things, and I feel like maybe there's like a Venn diagram that is a circle of like a lot of people who are involved with Bloomfield Development Corporation and Bloomfield Livable Streets.
Mhm.
And I feel like the BDC stuff usually is like at the front right now, so maybe that.
Okay. Awesome.
I guess I'll hop in here. My name is Nick Binfield. I still would consider myself pretty new to Pittsburgh. I've been here since like November or something like that. But I live in East Liberty and I work for Oakland Planning and Development Corporation. Much like Dave, I'm mostly here for just kind of personal interest. I'm a big cyclist, so yeah.
Very cool.
happy to meet everybody.
Yeah. Welcome to Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I feel like we got a good Bloomfield intro. I'm not sure if Bruce is able to chat at the moment. Either way, Bruce, feel free to chime in later. But I'm going to move on to our next slide, which is all about recruitment. So first things first is really building awareness of your organization and your mission, right? I feel like a lot of us get caught in the trap of sort of creating messaging or using language that appeals to people who are already very familiar with what we do. So people who are already loyal to our bike ped committees or perhaps already avid cyclists themselves, when really to bring new people into the fold, you need to broaden that scope. So staying away from jargony terms. I know people are very familiar with the word bike, but maybe not so much familiar with the ped shorthand, unless like in context clues are keys, right? But trying to avoid jargon in general, I think is a good practice. And then really what gets people from that awareness to action step is resonating with them personally. So conveying a cause that speaks to them, right? Whether it's a specific street in your neighborhood that's particularly dangerous, whether there have been crashes there or possibly pedestrian fatalities, those are right the most extreme examples. But if there's something that people are already aware of, a cause that they care about, they're much more likely to band together when it directly affects them. So with that, your messaging is key, right? Potential members need to understand your mission and how they can make a difference. So like I said, conveying the relatability of your cause, things that are close, familiar, meaningful. This really is just trying to drive home that personal connection, right? So a framework that I really like to use, both for membership campaigns, donation campaigns, really any sort of call to action we're making, is your lead in, imperative, solving the problem, your member role, and your ask, which that sounds like a lot, but it will come naturally as you go through. So your lead in is really your belief statement, right? Your mission, what you're trying to do. Your imperative is why it's important that people take action now. Like, what are the consequences of us not creating safer streets? Solving the problem. How are we going to do that? Are we, building new infrastructure for bicyclists and pedestrians? What are we doing to make this change happen, right? And then what is the members' role in this? How are they going to be a part of this mission? And then finally is your participatory ask. So what can they do to become a part of the organization and make a difference? Why is it imperative that they do? So you're connecting all of these points with your statement here. And I know all of this is much longer than what can fit into 140 characters, right? So this sort of framework is definitely more for those, whether they be in-person conversations, so like Tom was saying, connecting with individuals in the community. If you're trying to really help someone wrap their head around what a bike ped committee is, if they're not at all familiar, these are things that you really want to lay out. And I know it's easy to get kind of lost in those details if you're trying to explain it to someone who may not be at all familiar with your work, but this is an easy framework to remember that you can use. So you're making sure you're covering all of your bases when you're talking with potential new members. Social media is definitely another game because, you're keeping your content much more brief, to the point, snappy. Your content should be of your audience. So that's meaning depicting people, your target audience, right? So for instance, the imaging you're using should be inclusive. You're not just trying to, for instance, show photos of a bunch of white guys in spandex on bikes, right? That's like the most classic example. It should be for your audience. So like I was saying, potential new members, people who live in your community, people who will see the impact of your work or potentially want to contribute to it, or by your audience. So something that we really like to do, particularly for member campaigns and year-end donation campaigns, is using testimonies from current members or donors or people who've taken part in our programs, been a part of our work. So if you know of potentially a neighbor who bikes, walks, maybe isn't a part of your organization, or potentially a member who wouldn't mind giving you a quote that you can post on social media. It sounds like a small thing, but really putting a face to your organization with a quote goes a long way when it comes to that sort of storytelling about what you do, the difference you're making, right? Next is making it easy. So providing clear information on how to join, whether that be a link to a Google form. Links are key, really. The simpler, the better. If it's an email address, that's fine too, but just making it very, very obvious, again, of what their next steps are. Talking with, not at. So developing a conversational approach with your content, the messages you're posting. So not just, posting dead end statements or like links to articles with, your opinion, but rather posing questions or starting a dialogue between people so you can encourage conversation in the comments. Benchmarking is another great practice. So really, if some of you have social media accounts like Facebook or Instagram for your groups, you can use tools like Hootsuite. That's a great example of a tool that you can use to schedule your social media posts and then keep track of how they're performing. So just seeing how many likes things are getting, how often they're being shared. You can also do that manually or like in the business side of Facebook. But really matching that sort of activity and then the messaging that was included in that post to observe what's resonating with your audience and what sort of messaging you can be sharing. Does anyone have a good example of something that performed really well on their social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram? No.
Sarah, I have I don't know, maybe one thing I can bring up, but then it kind of turns into a question too on the topic of social media. So our group has a relatively new Facebook page, and we have, I think, maybe 11 or 14 members to date. It's not to 20 yet. Now, when we post things, like any of our admins post things there, we're only talking to the people that are already part of the group, right? Now we've had a couple people just sort of randomly find us and request to join, which is great. And, you know, on one occasion where I saw that, or a couple of occasions where I've seen that, I made sure to tag that person, like let everyone know, hey, you know, welcome so-and-so to the group. And, you know, if they have a great picture to share, or if anyone has a great picture to share about the neighborhood, like, you know, maybe asking like, what's your favorite street in the neighborhood to walk or ride, or something like that, that tries to start dialogue, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think, and to answer your question, I feel like that's like the best ways to have traction so far. But what do you think is a better way to use social media in terms of creating awareness that you exist, instead of just talking at the people that are already part of the group and already know that you're there? What would you say are some best practices to get people to see your page in the first place and want to join?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a great example. So you're existing in a Facebook group that has members and they have to request to join. I would say one way to get around that is creating a more public page. So something that people can follow rather, instead of joining as members. And maybe your membership dialogue exists in a different realm, whether it be like a Slack group or somewhere else. It could exist in the same place, but maybe that is more of a public facing social page, if that makes sense. So people don't have to be particularly members of it, but they can keep up with what you're sharing. Another suggestion would be encouraging members of that group to be sharing those posts on their individual channels. I know that may not directly feed to the people in your neighborhood in all cases, but it does help to broaden that scope and awareness. So I would say in general, more public facing channels are ideal. I don't know if you have Twitter, Instagram. I know it can be hard to manage a bunch of different channels at once. That can get kind of unwieldy. If you find that one works best for you, I would say stick with that and then try to slowly build on it. But definitely don't feel like you need to have all of the social media. I hope that helps.
It does. And one more kind of question to piggyback off that, if it's okay. Wondering if you have any suggestions when you have multiple admins across some different pages. What would you recommend to sort of come up with, you know, consistency of posting, not just who's posting on what, but maybe if there's any type of productivity app that reminds you to post things in certain places, or maybe even gives you ideas of what to post, you know, weekly, daily, a couple times a week, something like that. Is there anything like that that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple different, I'm actually going to pull up a different window. There are a couple tools that are similar to Hootsuite. There's one that's specific to Instagram, and I think it does help to give you more reminders per se, instead of just like scheduling. It's more of like ping notification on your phone. Anna's actually going to share this PowerPoint and some resources I put together following the presentation. So I will include the link to what I'm thinking of, but cannot recall the name of in that doc. But yes, there are definitely apps like that that exist. And I would highly recommend following other organizations, nonprofits, or other sort of community groups for that sort of inspiration you were talking about. Like, what should we be posting? Like, what do people respond to? Bike Pittsburgh particularly, I follow a ton of other bike ped nonprofit advocacy organizations because we all are creating somewhat similar content, but everyone's got fresh ideas. We're all unique individuals. So I would highly recommend just following people for that inspiration as well, not like one dedicated blog or channel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, next, leading to in-person recruitment. So obviously easier said than done right now, but these are just a few ideas of things that you can be doing that are offline. Reaching out to neighbors with a printed invitation is one that sounds a bit out there, but if your members are looking to try something new and perhaps get a little bit of exercise during quarantine, that is a great option. So not sending postcards, mailing things, spending a bunch of money, but literally writing up a letter with that sort of messaging that we talked about, who you are, what you're doing, why people should join, and just sticking them in mailboxes, hanging up flyers, setting up at community events once those are happening again, creating a sort of bring a friend social event, whether it be via Zoom or an outdoor space. Those are all great ways that you can just get the word out there, hopefully invite some new faces into your group. All right, moving on to engagement.
Sarah, we can't hear you. I thought it was just me too, but can everybody hear me? Okay.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
You hear? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm glad you told me. I guess what was the last thing you heard?
I don't remember, honestly.
It was basically the segue right to this whole next segment after recruiting. I thought it was just me too.
Yeah, I got distracted. I'm sorry.
You're good.
I switched rooms because I thought it was my internet.
No, well, you know how my internet is, Anna, too. Obviously, not the most reliable. With that, staying connected, first piece of engagement. So this is relevant to both members who are new to your organization or very, very familiar with your work, have been a part of your committee for years. The simplest thing you can do is send a welcome message or set up some sort of, communication that helps newcomers just get very familiar with your work, something aside from what they've seen on your social media channels before they come to their first meeting. So that could consist of, successful campaigns or upcoming projects that you're currently working on, just so that they can really get a feel for the work and how they can get involved right off the bat. Because you don't want to leave that up for them, right? To take the initiative, you want to spell it out for them. Like, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're working on. Does X interest you? Picking a communication method is another thing. I know we've been talking about social media channels a lot, whether you use Google Groups, email, Slack, whatever your MO is there, just be consistent, because communication between you and your members is key, but also between members and their fellow members, right? So making sure everyone is in the loop when new projects are coming up, new things are being announced, you want to be consistent. And then that really leads into campaigns and action, right? You want, even if there's kind of a standstill with the work you're doing, you want to be keeping people in the loop, because they're there to make a difference, right? There's a reason people joined your organization, and it's not just to get an email once a month or go to a meeting once a month. They want to be taking action. So being consistent with that messaging, those updates as well. and hosting a social event. I know this is maybe not as action friendly or, imperative there, but those personal connections really make a difference. That's a huge part of retention as well. So creating that sense of belonging and making sure everyone feels welcomed beyond the introduction, right? Making sure they feel like they're in an organization they want to be a part of. So social events like that can go a long way. And then moving on to hosting meetings. These are, again, just some best practices when it comes to Zoom meetings or in person. Sending a calendar invite sounds basic, but I'd be more specific in that you should provide a link to a calendar invite, whether it's Google Calendar or something with the Zoom link you're using, making it very, very easy for people to copy that meeting to their personal calendars. Goes a long way. I remember when we first started doing that for volunteer nights, you'd be surprised at how many more people showed up because they said, I got my calendar notification. I remembered that I signed up for this. So very simple, makes a big difference. Asking people to RSVP to your meetings, even if you're not going the calendar route, but some sort of, I'll be there, some sort of commitment, right? That gives people that sense of accountability. And then a reminder email, because you can never have enough reminders. People are busy. You have to respect that, but getting it on their calendars is important. So space, next thing is really making sure that wherever you're meeting is ADA accessible. They don't have to pay for anything, no entry fee, and you're following some sort of community agreements, being respectful for people's pronouns or their gender identities, whatever sort of language that you agree to at the beginning of meetings, creating a safe space. I think that's very important. Next is agenda. So this again sounds pretty simple, but making sure that you have an agenda before your meetings. So you're not just all showing up there and saying, okay, what are we talking about tonight? And then assigning someone to take minutes so people can take turns. So no one's stuck doing this every meeting you have, but it's another piece that just helps to create that sense of accountability, right? Someone feels like they're in charge of this and they have a little piece of ownership over that. 5-minute rule is another one I like to stick to, which is don't go longer than 5 minutes without an engagement opportunity. So that whether that be a question, you're asking for feedback, how an event went, new ideas people have, whatever sort of question or break you could put in there to interrupt your droning dialogue. I feel like I'm droning dialogue right now. I think a part of that is because this is Zoom and I can only see your muted faces. But you want to avoid doing that for a whole hour, right? Or even 30 minutes. So interrupting that, helping people create those engagement opportunities and really, make sure they feel like they're being heard as well. Setting goals, keyword here is achievable. You want to be setting SMART goals and action items for each meeting, what your next steps are, what are you going to do at your next meeting and the time in between, and really delegating those tasks and making sure that people know what they're accountable for, and setting realistic deadlines as well. I feel like it's one thing to say, hey, Tom, you're in charge of such. It's another thing to say, hey, Tom, can you please do this by February 28th? That creates a bit more solidity to that task, right? And then last is the follow-up. So sharing those agenda notes, whatever meeting notes were taken, when you all met, and then that list of assigned tasks. I guess with that, I'm probably past my 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions about engagement? That was a good reminder for me. All right. No questions. Moving on, but again, feel free to interrupt if something occurs to you while I'm speaking. Last, we have our Bike Pittsburgh barter membership. Anna reminded me I had to put a plug for this in here. remind them of their perks of being a part of your organization, right? So it's not just contributing to a cause they care about. It's not just being a part of this, awesome group of community members, meeting like-minded folks, but they can also earn a Bike Pittsburgh barter membership through their volunteer work and their amazing advocacy that they're doing in the community. So if you volunteer 10 or more hours a year, which bike ped committees certainly count towards, you can earn yourself a Bike Pittsburgh membership. And these are all the lovely perks of being a Bike Pittsburgh member. If you have questions about that, please ask me or Anna, and we will get you all started on that. But yeah, had to do my plug there. So last, I want to talk about retention. So really building loyalty and keeping your members around, right? This is all about the experience that your members have. So being ready is the first step. Like I talked about, creating that sort of welcoming message, making sure people know how they can, get involved, take action, what their next steps are after they just sign up on your website, your webpage, whatever the form is, and then providing support. So whether that be answering questions they may have or helping guide them into a role that works for them. I know some people are very introverted, some people are extroverted, some people don't care, so fall somewhere in the middle. You want to make sure that people aren't getting kind of lost in the shuffle. I know that doesn't happen so much with smaller organizations when you can probably count the number of people in the room on one or two hands, but if someone is perhaps more introverted or less vocal about what sort of roles they're comfortable with, I find that you can easily lose a member that way. I feel like volunteering is a perfect example of that. Like if you perhaps are sending someone out to flyer things, but you're not considerate of what sort of accommodations they may need or any physical limitations they may have. It's not good to make those sort of assumptions that someone is comfortable doing something when they very may well have a limitation or discomfort with some sort of task. So I would say not assuming anything about your members, providing the support that they may need. So finding a role for them that is suitable to what their interests are and what they can do. Those are all great things to keep in mind in terms of your membership experience. And then addressing conflict, if someone does have a negative experience with another member, or perhaps it's something you may have said, addressing that kind of conflict, or if there are shaky waters there, I would say it's best to address that sooner rather than later, because most of those things really do boil down to miscommunication. And the only way that you can remedy that is by speaking with that individual and hearing what their experience was. So number 4 is ask for their input. So this really comes down to feedback, right? I mean, we've all taken surveys from being a part of an organization, whether it be a gym or a nonprofit that you donate to. Those are the first things that came to my mind. You can tell I'm getting a little bit stir crazy in February. I'd love to go to a gym right now. Surveys doesn't have to be a formal thing, just asking for people's input, making sure you're hearing their ideas. Again, if perhaps they're not one to speak up at every meeting, making sure you're hearing the thoughts, opinions, ideas of your group. And then last but not least, I switched the word volunteer here because I think it's very applicable. The people who are members and bike ped committees are volunteers. Really, the things you want to encourage are ownership, impact, and appreciation. These are all things that you want to encourage and convey. So ownership is, again, collecting that feedback, making sure people's ideas are being heard, you're utilizing their skill sets. So perhaps, someone has a degree in grant writing or some sort of photography passion. There's things that you may not be aware of that could really, really make a difference in your organization when it comes to both recruitment and then your campaigns, whatever you're working on. So I'd say ask around for those interest, skill sets, see what people are willing to do, and then give them the responsibility. Like that's part of that ownership, right? Is making sure people feel like they have the autonomy to do these things. So that is all key. And then with impact, it's really being specific and clear about how their work is directly related to the cause of your organization, like how they're making a difference, even if it's a really seemingly low level task. You know, everything that they're doing, showing up to meetings, the work they're doing in the community and outreach, whatever they're working on, connecting that to your end goal and making sure that sort of impact is relayed in your regular communications. So I think this is most important when you're kind of between those projects and perhaps they can't see the very visual results of what you've been working on, conveying how the work they're doing is still making a difference. I think that sort of messaging is very integral to retention. And then appreciation, of course, sending thank you notes or emails, whatever you prefer, doing some sort of milestone recognition. So like if someone's been with your organization for 3 years, acknowledge that. Like that's something to celebrate. That's an awesome accomplishment, right? That these people are dedicated to your work and that should be recognized. So whether it's sending them an email, a thank you of some sort, that those notes go a long way. And then I keep on hyping the social. I know it's not the same via Zoom, but doing something fun. I know there are games. We played a really fun one. I don't know if Anna's tuned in right now. I'll share a link to a game we played via Zoom that was very fun. Do you remember what that was?
I don't remember what it was called, but it was pretty fun.
Okay.
It was just like kind of almost like trivia where you like entered in answers and played like sort of like a trivia game with a group of people. But it did feel like a bonding experience as virtually as you can do that. You know, without it being a public meeting.
Yeah. I think everyone's kind of burnt out on the idea of like happy hour at this point. It's just more screen time. So finding games or like little ways to connect with people that aren't just staring at each other's squares is great. Highly recommend. I'll find the link to that game and share it with you all because it was very fun. I know I'm selling this very well.
I think like a good example is kind of like Greenfield, like you all went out and did that litter pickup thing. I'm not sure who actually went, but you know, it was all masked event, you know, and it felt safe for people who were able to attend and people who didn't feel safe didn't have to attend. You know, like I know Bloomfield, you've done like a bunch of stuff over the years that have been super engaging, and even during COVID, like you've just gotten more involved in like all of the move forward projects, and like those are really great ways to get involved like in the city and like outside of the city. Like Tom, you joined in like other groups bike ped meetings, which is great. You know, like you can join other people's bike ped meetings even if they're not your own or if they're in another neighborhood. It's just a way to connect with other people. So lots of ways to connect even though we are kind of staying at home.
Well, it sounds like you're all crushing it. I mean, it's fitting that now my next slide, I had to put a quote from a famous person in here that's like, it just seemed really right. If you can tell, I don't do a lot of workshops, but I thought this really drove home the point of retention and appreciation, right? Because 10 years from now, 5 years from now, people might forget the exact campaigns that you all worked on, what you talked about at every single meeting, right? They're not going to remember that, but they will remember the experience, how they were treated by you or the organization and as a whole, you know, their fellow members, leadership, they will remember their experience. So I think this encapsulates really well, and it's something to remember as you're thinking about retention. And then you can do it. So just kind of our takeaways from this workshop, right? Really communicating the need for your work, how members can make a difference, and that's why they should get involved, the actionable work that they can take. And then engagement is really creating that clear path to action and the sense of belonging, right? And retention, helping members see their impact and feel appreciated for their efforts. So with that, that is my slideshow. Thank you all so much for listening to me present this information. I am very happy to take any questions you may have specific to membership, specific to bike ped committees, sustaining, retention, building. I'm throwing out all my buzzwords. I'm open for questions. Also, I should
Sarah,
yes.
I'm curious kind of on the piece of managing what people are involved with, sort of like delegating, finding out people's strengths, and therefore sort of, giving those action items.
Mhm.
What have you found to be some of the best project management tools? Like, we have a shared Google Drive and we have some Google Documents. And I think that that's fared well so far. But I was just wondering if there's any other sort of project management tools that maybe you've seen other groups have a lot of success with, maybe if it's like Trello boards or anything like that. And also what your suggestions would be for members that are less tech savvy and less sort of interested in learning how to adopt tools like that, like sort of the best ways to get them to adopt.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the project management tools that I've personally used at Bike Pittsburgh have been Basecamp, Asana, and I'm blanking on the third one. I will link it again in that doc that I mentioned that Anna will share around. Trello is one I've kind of played with on non-work related projects. I think they're all great tools, right? Each one is going to have its pros and cons. I would say in terms of getting people to actually adopt them, right, and use these tools to actually make these projects in their lives easier, I would say see what the group likes, right? You can't force a tool on people when they don't find it to be convenient for them, when they don't find it helpful. So I would say maybe do a little exploring on your own, see what you think would be the best fit for, say.
You just cut out, Sarah.
No. Oh,
There
no.
you go. You're back. It almost sounds like a blanket like hits your microphone.
It's a pillow.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Now we know.
You know. I guess, where did I cut off?
You were talking about sort of getting a feel for what people like most. I don't know if you were referencing anything specifically. It was like right when you went to transition, it was like we heard the microphone get covered.
With that, I would say maybe do a little bit of exploring on your own then and see what tools you think would work based on the number of people you have to assign tasks to, how many projects you're working on at once, like how many simultaneous things you have. And then from there, maybe choose one option. If people are for it, stick with it. If people are very vocal in their dislike for this tool, I would say that's when it's time to adapt and try something else. It's hard for me to recommend one in particular because, like I said, I think they all have their pros and cons. Like, no tool is going to be the perfect answer for every organization. But yeah, in terms of adapting, I would say really trust your gut, try something you think would work for your org, and then see what sort of feedback you get and go from there. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, any other questions?
Donna Green here. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. I have a question about your engagement opportunity. Every 5 minutes seems like a pretty short attention span. And after a while, if you don't get any engagement from participants, doesn't it get a little bit awkward? And if so, is there any way you can sort of prompt people to participate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it kind of depends on the layout or the style of your meeting, right? 5 minutes can seem very much like an interruption when it's I'd say a very, very long meeting. If you're holding a much shorter meeting though, I feel like 5 minutes can be appropriate. Some ways to, I guess, pose that interruption or frame it so it doesn't seem as like a question with a long pause every single time and potential crickets could be, for instance, if you're doing a Zoom meeting or presentation and you want to integrate some type of survey questions. I know Google Hangouts does this as well now, as well. Next to the chat feature, you can create little surveys, either ahead of time or like in the moment, of where people can share their feedback just by clicking on the screen, and that can help lead into your next dialogue, your next, point of discussion. So it doesn't always have to be like, unmute yourself, please answer this. You can frame it in a different way.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question, Sarah.
Yeah.
How's it going? Great job. Hey, so my question might not be so much as a membership specific and outreach specific, but like I was thinking today during my multiple Zoom meetings, what's going to happen once we get out of COVID and we're able to have in-person meetings, like actual like monthly meetings? How do you think we as advocacy groups or even as Bike Pittsburgh, are you still going to be doing these workshops both in person with like a computer there too, so people can like sit on their couch at home and still watch it? Is that what the future of our like meetings are going to be like, where we can meet in person, but we also have an option where people are like who can like attend while being at home? And if so, are we just carrying around laptops and iPads around everywhere with us? What is that going to look like to really make sure that, even without COVID, wouldn't that have been, and isn't it the most accessible way, is having in-person meetings, but also having like a way for people to call in or something?
I think you just answered your own question.
Right, but I guess is there an actual policy that either Pike Pittsburgh has or a guide or toolkit or guidelines that you all have come up with yet? Maybe we don't need one, but I'm just wondering, is this something that we have thought about as an organization or as a city?
I can answer that if you want me to. I have thought this extensively, since this pretty much covers some topics of equity, for the stay-at-home mom that can't find babysitting but wants to attend, and you could just log into the computer, and it doesn't really matter. Or someone who isn't feeling well and is sick at home, they could log in. There's the reasons for having something virtual are pretty much unlimited. So I think it's going to go without saying that from now on, quarterly meetings, at least that I host, are always, when they turn back to in person, will be, I'll just bring my laptop or something, or figure out a way to get that to be online. And no longer, unless it's like a bike ride or something that feels pretty impossible, I'll definitely encourage it. And I think too that most people, when they meet in some sort of a meeting space. So there usually is Wi-Fi, or they're all sitting at a table anyways, where it makes sense to just turn a computer around and have other people join in on it. So I think without a doubt that can happen. And this is kind of a good place where the relationship with Bike Pittsburgh can work out pretty well, because if I'm able to attend and say someone doesn't have that technology, I can provide it. So a Wi-Fi hotspot, if you're meeting outside having a picnic, I can bring our Wi-Fi hotspot. I can bring our Bike Pittsburgh tablet or something like that to make it to make that happen, because at this point, there really isn't a reason for us to not do this for everybody.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think we've developed any sort of formal toolkit of the sort or guidelines for that, but I would say that's something that we personally are looking to continue because, like you said, it makes sense for all of those reasons, accessibility and whatnot. So yeah,
And I think after the pandemic, or like when it's safe to return to in-person stuff, hopefully everyone is so tired of like staying at home that meeting in person will be incentive enough to get people to come out. And then, you know, for whatever other reason to leave it virtual, you know, it'll sort itself out. So you won't get low attendance or anything like that.
yeah, fingers crossed. We're all excited to see each other in person again when we can. Yeah, I guess any questions, meetings, recruitment, retention, membership.
I know one thing that a lot of groups struggle with is getting like their sophomore class. You know, it's like all the groups have no trouble really like starting and finding initial members, but what advice do you have to groups that struggle getting that like second or third wave of people to join? How would you help, or what advice do you have for doing that?
Yeah, I think that really goes back to making sure you're constantly getting out in front of new faces. So while, you know, it's comfortable to say, hey, we have this great, engaged, passionate membership base, you know, there's inevitably going to be some turnover, some membership churn there because people move, people, you know, change jobs, get a little bit too busy, their life changes, right? And they may not be able to commit to your organization for the rest of their lives. Imagine that. So just wanting to, I'd say, being mindful of the fact that you should always be recruiting on some level, you know, how much time and energy you're going to have to dedicate to that will flux. But I would say keeping an eye out for those opportunities, whether they be community events that you can be tabling at, or say just, you know, something that's going, I hate using the Bernie Sanders meme, but it came up in another meeting I had today, like hopping on things that you know people are going to share and making it relevant. Like that sounds cheesy and is probably a cheap way of using social media, but it works, right? That's kind of what marketing is catching on to those things that people are sharing. So whether it be sharing things via social media like that or getting in front of new faces, I would say just always have it on some level of your awareness that you need to be recruiting new members. So where that lies in your priorities, you know, will go up and down. But I'd say that is the key to getting a so-called sophomore class or, you know, new faces constantly, is never letting that fall by the wayside. All right. I mean, I guess, are there any other questions about tools or things that you would be interested that I can include in that doc with this recording that Anna will be sharing around? I'm happy to share some more resources if there's anything of interest to you all.
Sarah, I can't think of anything else right now, but this was fantastic. Thank you so much for hosting this and putting this together.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope everyone learned some things or, you know, took some helpful takeaways for your bike ped committees. I have my email on the slide, but I'm also on Facebook. I'm on the Woman on Binary Facebook group. There's another plug. So you can connect with me in all sorts of ways. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have down the road as they occur to you. I am available. So thank you all for showing up tonight and adding some hours to your screen time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.